In my life, I have always struggled and envied people who have figured out a way to make a difference in the world. People who know how, as we like to say, move the needle.
Late-night television is meant to be harmless, a place for laughter, charm, and casual conversation. But on David Letterman's stage, things didn't always stay that way. What started as friendly interviews sometimes spiraled into tense, uncomfortable encounters, moments so raw they made audiences shift uneasily in their seats. Even Letterman would later admit some guests weren't just challenging, they were unsettling. These are 9 appearances that pushed late-night TV beyond entertainment and into something far darker. Harvey Pekar. When comic book legend Harvey Pekar made his second appearance on Late Night with David Letterman in July 1987, things didn't exactly go according to plan. At first, it seemed like a normal segment. Letterman thanked Harvey for featuring him on the cover of American Splendor Volume 12, even joking that Pekar looked far more relaxed and laid back this time around compared to his first visit. But anyone who knew Harvey Pekar knew that laid back wasn't really his style. Early into the interview, Pekar casually dropped a revelation. He'd been offered his own talk show and turned it down. His explanation was raw and direct. He believed that once you joined the mainstream media, you got co-opted. To him, doing a nightly show meant watering down your ideas and being forced to churn out simple-minded entertainment. Right then, the room's energy shifted. The tension was thick enough to feel through the TV screen. When the show returned from a commercial break, things took an even sharper turn. Pekar immediately launched into a tirade against NBC and its parent company, General Electric. He wasn't just poking fun, he was calling out what he saw as corporate hypocrisy. Letterman, visibly uncomfortable, tried steering the conversation elsewhere, but Pekar wasn't letting go. Then came the moment that defined the interview. Pekar looked at Letterman and called him out for what he saw as a cozy relationship with GE. He pointed out that while Dave often made lighthearted jokes about the company, there were serious issues that deserved attention. He even mentioned GE being sued in Ohio for selling unsafe nuclear reactors. That was the final straw. Letterman snapped. In the closing moments of the segment, he exploded in frustration, accusing Pekar of wasting his opportunities on the show. His words were sharp and cutting. He mocked American Splendor, calling it a little Mickey Mouse magazine, and told Pekar he wasn't welcome back. The segment ended abruptly, cutting to commercial. But even after the break, Letterman couldn't resist one last jab. With a smirk, he told the audience, "You're a guest in my house, so keep quiet. You show up to my house and you sneeze in the hors d'oeuvres." It was brutal and uncomfortable to watch. Despite that chaotic exchange, Pekar returned to Late Night in August 1988. Predictably, the same tension resurfaced. Once again, Pekar challenged the network, and once again, Letterman lashed out, insisting that his claims were false and that the show wasn't the place for such talk. Dave even repeated the old insult about Pekar's little newsletter. Years later, though, Letterman's perspective softened. With decades of experience behind him, he admitted he would have handled those moments very differently. Reflecting on those fiery encounters, he said he was far better equipped now to deal with personalities like Harvey Pekar. He even expressed genuine admiration for him. Letterman came to appreciate what Pekar represented, a man unafraid to go after institutions, including the one he was sitting in. He described Pekar as relentless, honest, and deeply committed, noting that his challenges weren't an act or a publicity stunt. Back then, Letterman said, he couldn't understand it. He just wanted Pekar to play along, to go with the flow. But with time and perspective, Dave admitted he wished he could have had Pekar on every night. It's a bittersweet reflection. Harvey Pekar passed away in July 2010 from an accidental overdose involving antidepressants. At the time, he was preparing for cancer treatment. In hindsight, his clashes with Letterman weren't just about television drama. They were about a man who refused to compromise his principles, even under the bright lights of late-night TV. Madonna. Late-night television has always been that comforting space where viewers unwind with humor, charm, and the occasional surprise. But sometimes what's meant to be easy entertainment turns into something unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. One of those moments happened in 1994 when Madonna appeared on Late Night with David Letterman. What started as a simple interview quickly spiraled into one of the most chaotic, uncomfortable, and talked about moments in late-night history. At that point, Madonna wasn't just a pop star. She was a cultural force. Every move she made was dissected by the media, and controversy followed her like a shadow. Her appearance on Letterman was supposed to be just another playful interview. But from the moment she walked onto the stage, things took an unexpected turn. Letterman tried to keep things light, teasing her about her dating life and even urging her to kiss a man in the audience. Madonna wasn't having it. She refused, pushed back hard, and even called Letterman a sick person right on air. The crowd was stunned, unsure whether to laugh or cringe, and that was only the beginning. Midway through the interview, Madonna presented Letterman with a piece of her used underwear, playfully demanding to know why he hadn't sniffed it yet. She laced her responses with non-stop innuendo, leaving Letterman desperately trying to steer things back to safer ground. But there was no calming that storm. The tension was so thick that producers had to cut to commercial breaks multiple times, hoping to reset the energy. It didn't help. Madonna continued dropping F-bombs, completely ignoring the censors and the discomfort filling the room. Behind the scenes, the night had already been set up for chaos. Producer Daniel Kellison later revealed that the plan for the segment was actually meant to be funny and self-aware. Madonna was supposed to scold Letterman for mocking her in his monologues, and they'd play clips of his jokes. Everyone expected a cheeky, entertaining exchange, but when Kellison stopped by her dressing room before the show, it was clear things wouldn't go according to plan. When he walked in, Madonna was with her makeup artist and immediately greeted him with a crude remark. She laughed it off, but Kellison quickly sensed that her energy was off. When he tried to brief her on the interview setup, she admitted she'd smoked a little endo, slang for cannabis, before arriving. She said the plan was too much to remember and brushed it aside. That interview, which was supposed to be short and funny, turned into a 20-minute spectacle. Madonna refused to leave the stage, forcing producers to cut the next guest entirely. Letterman reportedly knew from the start that the whole thing was going to crash and burn, and he wasn't wrong. Later, Madonna claimed her behavior was part protest, part performance. She said she wanted to push back against television censorship and shake up how women were expected to act on TV. Afterward, she even wrote an open letter to her fans, defending the interview. She told them to get over the fact that she smoked a cigar, said the F-word a few times, and made Letterman look foolish, arguing that the entire backlash exposed the world still was. In time, the tension between Madonna and Letterman cooled. Just a month later, she returned to the show, this time bringing him flowers and candy for Valentine's Day, joking that she was a changed woman since meeting him. By September of that same year, they even appeared together at the MTV Video Music Awards, suggesting that all was forgiven. Years later, Madonna finally opened up about what really fueled that infamous night. During a 2015 conversation with Howard Stern, she admitted there were two main reasons behind her outrageous behavior. First, she genuinely had some resentment toward Letterman at the time and used the interview to let off steam. But there was another, more personal reason too. She was dating Tupac Shakur during that period, and said the relationship had her in a weird mood. He had her feeling rebellious and defiant, which carried right onto the stage. Oprah Winfrey. When it comes to television legends, Oprah Winfrey and David Letterman easily stand among the greats. Both dominated their respective corners of TV for decades, reshaping the talk show landscape in their own unique ways. Oprah became a cultural powerhouse with The Oprah Winfrey Show, which ran from 1986 to 2011 and became the highest-rated daytime talk show in history. Over the years, she collected an impressive 18 Daytime Emmy Awards and built a brand recognized across the globe. David Letterman, on the other hand, made his mark in the late-night world. He launched Late Night with David Letterman in 1982 on NBC, and later moved to CBS in 1993 after signing a massive $14 million deal to take over the 11:30 p.m. slot. His mix of sarcasm, wit, and unpredictability made him one of television's most influential hosts. But behind the fame and laughter, a surprising feud quietly brewed between these two giants, a tension that lasted nearly 2 decades. The story began back in the 1980s when Oprah first appeared as a guest on Letterman's show. It didn't go well. According to People magazine, Oprah left feeling humiliated after being the punchline of several of Letterman's jokes. She later told Time magazine that she felt completely uncomfortable during the experience, which led her to avoid his show for years afterward. Letterman himself would later admit that he might have made things worse, especially after an awkward vacation encounter where he jokingly told a waiter that Oprah would be paying for his lunch. The joke landed him a free meal, but also seemed to deepen the rift. Then came the 1995 Academy Awards, where Letterman hosted and took another playful jab at Oprah in front of millions of viewers. He introduced Oprah Winfrey and Uma Thurman by repeating their names in a mock introduction: Oprah, Uma, Oprah, a gag that left many viewers cringing. For years, people assumed that this joke was the reason for Oprah's long-standing grudge, but Letterman later revealed that the feud went back even further, explaining to Jon Stewart that Oprah had disliked him long before the Oscars incident, starting with that infamous unpaid lunch. By the early 2000s, Letterman started making public gestures to reconcile. In 2003, he joked on air about wanting to host what he called the Super Bowl of Love with Oprah. Around the same time, Oprah sent him a thoughtful gift of books to celebrate the birth of his son, and even invited him to appear on her show. But Letterman declined, joking that if he went on the Oprah Winfrey Show, he'd end up crying on national television, a moment he wasn't ready for. 2 years later, in 2005, Oprah finally accepted an invitation to appear on Letterman's show, ending a 16-year hiatus. Their reunion was surprisingly warm. Letterman, ever the comedian, playfully called her the most beloved woman in America, despite giving us Dr. Phil. Oprah laughed it off, and the two discussed how the supposed feud had spiraled into something far bigger than either of them ever intended. Oprah even clarified that she'd never seen it as a feud at all, but rather a misunderstanding. Not long after, in 2007, Letterman returned the favor by appearing on the Oprah Winfrey Show for the first time. The usually guarded host opened up about his personal life, talking about his son and his heart surgery. While it was a big moment for both, they still didn't fully confront the awkward history between them. That came later in 2013, when Letterman appeared on Oprah's new series, Oprah's Next Chapter. It was during this sit-down that Oprah finally explained the real reason she'd avoided his show for so long. She described her first appearance as a terrible experience, recalling how members of the audience, many of them drunk, were shouting and taunting her while Letterman seemed to encourage it. Letterman listened quietly and offered a sincere apology for how she had been treated. After decades of tension, jokes, and missed opportunities, the two television icons finally buried the hatchet. Lindsay Lohan. It was 2013, and Lindsay Lohan found herself sitting across from late-night legend David Letterman. She came prepared to promote her new movie, Scary Movie 5, but what unfolded that night was anything but a typical press stop. From the very start, Letterman steered the conversation away from her film. What began as playful banter about her public image quickly turned tense. The jokes about shoplifting rumors were sharp but manageable, until Letterman suddenly changed gears and asked, point blank, if she was supposed to be in rehab. Lindsay, visibly uncomfortable but composed, confirmed she was heading in for treatment soon. Letterman pressed on, asking what exactly she'd be treated for and what would be on the list once she checked in. The audience laughed, but the moment carried a sting. Trying to maintain her dignity, Lindsay reminded him that none of this was part of their pre-interview discussion. She added that she felt happiest and healthiest when she was working, seeing the upcoming rehab stay as a chance to refocus her life. By the end of the segment, Letterman did acknowledge her courage, but the damage was already done. Lindsay was clearly emotional, holding back tears as he continued to prod. When he pushed further about her addiction, she fired back that he was starting to sound like Dr. Phil. Letterman tried to ease the tension with a joke about his own blackouts, but the exchange had already exposed just how uncomfortable the entire interview had become. Years later, that moment resurfaced across social media, reigniting public conversation after the release of Framing Britney Spears. Many viewers drew parallels between the way both women were treated by the media, mocked, picked apart, and reduced to their lowest moments for entertainment. Online, people pointed out how Letterman's repeated focus on Lindsay's rehab only reinforced the stigma surrounding addiction and mental health struggles. And as the internet tends to do, it didn't stop there. Once the clip went viral again, more examples of Letterman's questionable interviews began circulating. BuzzFeed even compiled a list highlighting instances where he crossed the line: objectifying Jennifer Lopez, ignoring Janet Jackson's boundaries, and harshly mocking Monica Lewinsky. It all painted a picture of a time when late-night television often blurred the line between humor and humiliation. Letterman wasn't alone in that behavior, but he became one of its most visible examples. It was an era when interviews like Lindsay's could pass without much pushback. Looking back now, it's hard to imagine something like that happening today. Public attitudes toward mental health, addiction, and respect for women in media have evolved dramatically. Still, hindsight doesn't erase the discomfort of what happened. That 2013 interview remains a reminder of how normalized it once was to turn someone's pain into a punchline, and how much has changed since then. Crispin Glover. Crispin Glover. Even his name sounds like something out of a strange, offbeat novel. And honestly, it fits him perfectly. From the very start of his career in the early 1980s, Glover built a reputation as one of Hollywood's most eccentric and unpredictable performers. Every role he took seemed to prove that no one else operated quite like him. Think about it. He went from playing George McFly, the timid father in Back to the Future, to the deeply unsettling Mr. World in American Gods. Glover has always existed in his own lane, an actor who doesn't just perform roles but transforms into them completely. But if you really want to understand the strange brilliance of Crispin Glover, there's one moment that captures it better than any movie ever could: his infamous 1987 appearance on The David Letterman Show. At the time, Glover was promoting River's Edge, a dark coming-of-age drama where he played Lane, a teenager who helps cover up his friend's murder of his girlfriend. The film was disturbing, inspired by a true story, and showcased Glover's uncanny ability to play unsettling characters. But what happened on Letterman's stage that year took his reputation to a whole new level. When Glover walked out that night, the audience immediately knew something was off. He wasn't just acting strange, he looked strange too. He wore mismatched stripes, enormous platform shoes, thick glasses, and a messy wig. Instead of calmly promoting his movie, he began nervously reading from a crumpled copy of the LA Weekly, quoting articles about himself in an uneven, almost sing-song voice. The crowd wasn't sure whether to laugh with him or at him. Letterman, clearly bewildered, tried to keep things together. At one point, he even leaned over to his band leader and joked about watching a man drown on live television. The awkward tension only grew when Glover suddenly challenged Letterman to an arm wrestling match, shouting about how strong he was. Before anyone could react, he launched into a full karate kick that came dangerously close to Letterman's face. That was the breaking point. Letterman simply stood up, muttered something about checking on the top 10 list, and walked off stage, leaving the audience in total shock. It became one of the wildest moments in late-night TV history. When Glover returned to the show a few weeks later, he seemed cheerful and calm, offering only a cryptic explanation. He said he wanted the segment to be an interesting kind of a thing, and in that sense, he definitely succeeded. People couldn't stop talking about it. For decades, fans and critics debated what had actually happened that night. Some believed Glover had genuinely lost control, while others suspected he was performing. Years later, in a SiriusXM interview, Glover addressed the mystery. Though in typical fashion, he kept it vague. He claimed he could neither confirm nor deny that it was really him on Letterman's stage. What he did hint at, however, connected everything. The person audiences saw in 1987 wasn't Crispin Glover at all. It was a character named Reuben. 4 years later, in the 1991 cult film Reuben and Ed, Glover played Reuben, an odd recluse who embarks on a bizarre desert journey to bury his dead cat. Watching the movie now, the connection is unmistakable. Rubin wears similar clothes, moves with the same jerky energy, and even performs a dramatic kick, just like the one Glover threw at Letterman. It turns out that Meltdown was a piece of performance art. Glover had blurred the line between reality and fiction so completely that even David Letterman, one of the sharpest hosts in the business, didn't realize he was part of a live character experiment. Looking back, that moment has become legendary, not just for its chaos, but for what it said about acting itself. Glover reminded everyone that for true performers, the stage doesn't end when the cameras start rolling. He didn't just act in character, he lived it. And in doing so, he turned one of television's most awkward interviews into an unforgettable piece of pop culture history. Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix has always been known as one of the most intense, transformative actors of his generation. From Walk the Line to The Master, Joker, and Gladiator, his performances don't just impress, they consume him. But that same deep commitment to his craft has also spilled into his off-screen appearances, especially on live television. Phoenix isn't just an actor who plays roles. Sometimes he brings those roles with him, even when the cameras aren't rolling on a movie set. Take his 2019 appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live, for example. What seemed like a normal promotional interview for Joker suddenly took a wild turn when Kimmel played an outtake from the film's set. In the clip, Phoenix was seen lashing out, cursing repeatedly at a crew member named Larry. The audience laughed, Kimmel grinned, and Phoenix appeared mortified, even apologizing for his behavior. But soon after, his PR team revealed the whole thing had been staged. Just another elaborate prank designed to throw people off. It was classic Joaquin, unpredictable, layered, and impossible to pin down. But his most unforgettable talk show moment came a decade earlier. In 2009, Phoenix appeared on The Late Show with David Letterman to promote his film Two Lovers, or at least that's what everyone thought he was there to do. Instead, he shuffled onto the stage looking completely unrecognizable. Long, scruffy beard, dark sunglasses, chewing gum, and speaking in mumbled, one-word answers. Letterman, ever the seasoned host, tried to engage him, but the exchange quickly spiraled into one of the most awkward interviews in TV history. Phoenix barely spoke, avoided eye contact, and eventually stuck his gum under Letterman's desk. The host, trying to make sense of it all, cracked jokes to keep the audience laughing, even teasing him about looking like he'd been living off the grid. By the end, Letterman signed off with one of his sharpest one-liners, leaving the crowd howling, and Phoenix sitting stone-faced. At the time, no one knew what to make of it. Was Joaquin having a breakdown? Was it performance art? Or had Hollywood just witnessed a man unraveling in real time? Months later, the truth finally came out. Phoenix had been working with Casey Affleck on a mockumentary called I'm Still Here, a bizarre experiment exploring fame, identity, and the absurdity of celebrity culture. That late-night meltdown, it wasn't real. It was part of the movie. The entire thing had been planned, and Phoenix was simply staying in character. When he returned to The Late Show the following year, the tension had eased. Clean-shaven and back to his old self, Phoenix admitted that his little act had frustrated Affleck, who wanted him to stay in character all the way through. Letterman, with his usual dry humor, told him it had felt like watching someone take a tumble in the bathtub. Phoenix laughed, apologized, and admitted the movie hadn't exactly been a success. "We made 75 cents, he told the audience, summing up the strange chapter in his career with a smile. Unfortunately, I'm Still Here didn't just flop. It also left a trail of personal and professional fallout. The film's production became mired in controversy after two women who worked on it accused Casey Affleck of conduct. The lawsuits were settled out of court, but the damage to Affleck's reputation and his relationship with Phoenix was irreversible. The situation was made even more complicated by the fact that Affleck was married to Phoenix's sister, Summer. Joaquin later admitted that the scandal and the aftermath completely fractured their bond. When asked about it years later, he said simply that his sister and Affleck divorced, and he hadn't spoken to Casey since. Despite that rocky period, Phoenix eventually found his way back into Hollywood's good graces. By 2020, he stood on the Oscars stage holding the trophy for Best Actor for Joker, a comeback that few could have predicted after that infamous Letterman interview. It was a full-circle moment for a performer who had spent years blurring the line between art and reality. Jennifer Aniston. Jennifer Aniston has long been one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. Since Friends became a global phenomenon in the mid-1990s, her life has been under a microscope. Her marriages to Brad Pitt and Justin Theroux, her rumored relationships, her friendships, everything. So when she sat across from David Letterman, viewers already knew sparks could fly. And in more than one interview, they absolutely did. In 2006, Aniston appeared on The Late Show with David Letterman to promote her romantic comedy The Breakup, co-starring Vince Vaughn. By that time, Aniston and Vaughn's real-life relationship was already tabloid fodder, though she was clearly not interested in discussing it publicly. Still, from the start of that interview, things took an awkward turn. Letterman fixated on her legs, complimenting them multiple times before shifting the conversation to her relationship with Vaughn. Then came the question that made everyone watching hold their breath. Letterman asked whether it had been Vaughn's idea for her to appear naked in the film. Caught off guard but composed, Aniston deflected with a quick response, saying he should have asked Vaughn that when he was on the show. Letterman laughed, then pushed further, saying Vaughn had gotten all squirrely when asked the same thing. Sensing where things were headed, Aniston smoothly flipped the script. She redirected the conversation completely, asking Letterman about his own long-running feud with Oprah Winfrey. For a brief moment, she had him off balance. But in true Letterman fashion, he circled right back to Vince Vaughn, pressing her for an answer. After several minutes of playful but uncomfortable back and forth, Aniston finally put her foot down with a firm, "Let's move on." She never answered the question, and didn't need to. Her body language said enough. But that wasn't the first time Aniston had found herself in an awkward moment on Letterman's show. To understand the full picture, you have to rewind to 1998, when she appeared to promote Friends. What happened that night would go down as one of the strangest moments in talk show history. In the middle of their conversation, Letterman suddenly rolled his chair closer to her, announcing that he wanted to try one thing. Before anyone could process what was happening, he reached over, grabbed a strand of her hair, and actually put it in his mouth. The audience gasped as Aniston froze in disbelief, letting out a nervous laugh. Letterman then casually handed her a tissue to wipe off her hair and said, "People are horrified by that. We'll take it out in editing." Of course, it was never edited out. The clip went viral before viral was even a thing. Many viewers were shocked by how casually the moment was played off. Though Letterman was never formally accused of harassment, his reputation for inappropriate behavior toward female guests and staff has been a long-discussed part of his legacy. He later admitted to having affairs with multiple employees, adding another layer of controversy to his image. For Jennifer Aniston, those experiences seem to linger as rare moments when her easygoing composure was visibly tested. Yet despite all the public discomfort and scrutiny, she has never once spoken out against Letterman or called him out for his behavior. Instead, she handled those moments the way she's handled most of her career, with restraint, professionalism, and quiet strength, even when the cameras were capturing something far less flattering. Paris Hilton. After the success of framing Britney Spears, many high-profile women began re-examining how the media treated them during the 2000s. Among them was Paris Hilton, who decided to revisit one of the most uncomfortable moments of her career, her 2007 interview with David Letterman. At the time, Paris had just been released from a brief jail sentence for violating her DUI probation by driving with a suspended license. The story had dominated headlines, and while it might have been irresistible tabloid material, Paris made it clear she didn't want to discuss it. When she appeared on The Late Show with David Letterman, she believed the topic was off-limits. According to Paris, her PR team had explicitly told Letterman's staff that any questions about her jail time were not to be brought up. She thought it was a done deal. Years later, she opened up about the experience on her podcast, This Is Paris, alongside her sister, Nikki Hilton Rothschild. She explained that she went into that interview feeling safe. She'd been on the show several times before and trusted Letterman to keep his word. But once the cameras started rolling, that trust evaporated. Instead of promoting her new projects, Letterman zeroed in on her time in jail. He turned what was supposed to be a lighthearted interview into a relentless interrogation, making joke after joke at her expense. Paris tried to deflect, smiling politely and steering the conversation toward her work. But Letterman wouldn't let up. The questions kept coming. The audience laughed awkwardly. Paris's discomfort was visible. Eventually, she told him that he was making her sad and hurting her feelings, but even then, he didn't stop. She later described how things were just as tense off-camera. During commercial breaks, she pleaded with him to stop bringing it up, reminding him that he'd promised to avoid the topic. According to Paris, he would nod, act agreeable, and then dive right back into the same questions as soon as filming resumed. By the time the interview ended, she said she left the stage in tears, shaken and humiliated. For Paris, that moment was a turning point. She told Letterman afterward that she wouldn't be returning to the show. In her words, the experience felt cruel and unnecessary. Though she didn't lash out, she made it clear that he had crossed a line. Letterman, apparently realizing he'd gone too far, later reached out to apologize and even sent a case of wine to her home. What's surprising is that despite how deeply hurt she was, Paris did eventually return to The Late Show. As she explained on her podcast, Letterman apologized multiple times, assuring her that things would be different. She eventually agreed to give him another chance. When she came back in 2008, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Letterman greeted her warmly, brought her flowers, and publicly apologized on air. He admitted that he felt terrible about how he'd handled the previous interview and said he never wanted to make enemies. Paris, ever the professional, accepted the apology with grace and even a hint of humor, telling him she hoped he'd gotten the jail jokes out of his system. Reflecting on it years later, Paris said she truly believed Letterman had learned his lesson. The backlash after that 2007 interview had been significant. People were upset even then at how uncomfortable it was to watch. She acknowledged that times have changed, and that there's now a greater awareness of how women in the spotlight are treated by the media. For her, that moment with Letterman stands as a painful reminder of how far things have come and how much they needed to. Chris Rock. Chris Rock has always been known for his sharp wit, fearless humor, and that electric stage presence that instantly lights up any room. Before that headline-making Oscar moment years later, Rock had already built a reputation for being brutally honest. Someone who wasn't afraid to speak his mind, no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. That same unfiltered energy carried into his late-night interviews, especially whenever he sat across from the legendary David Letterman. Now, David Letterman was no stranger to controversy himself. His interviewing style was direct, unpredictable, and often walked a fine line between sharp comedy and uncomfortable tension. Over the years, he had developed a reputation for pushing his guests, sometimes too far. But when Chris Rock came on, it wasn't your typical interview. It was two heavyweight comedians going toe-to-toe, both ready to throw verbal jabs, both knowing how to land a punchline that could either sting or make the room erupt in laughter. One of the most talked about moments came during Rock's 2011 appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman. From the second he walked out, Rock was pure energy, fast-talking, animated, and completely unpredictable. What started as a casual catch-up turned into nearly 15 minutes of chaos, with Rock weaving jokes about his life, his career, and of course, Letterman himself. The crowd quickly learned that Rock had no problem teasing the host. When the topic of family came up, Rock playfully joked about Letterman's young son in a way that left both the host and the audience in disbelief. The line was bold enough to draw a mix of laughter, gasps, and even a few boos from the crowd. But that was the magic of Chris Rock. He knew how to push limits and still keep people watching. And he didn't stop there. A few minutes later, Rock shifted gears and decided to poke fun at Letterman's place within CBS. This was around the same time Charlie Sheen's public meltdown had dominated headlines, leading to his dramatic exit from 2.5 Men. Without missing a beat, Rock joked that Letterman had officially become the craziest guy at the network. The audience howled, but Letterman could only shake his head, half amused, half exasperated. Throughout the interview, Rock had this hilarious habit of ending almost every sentence by tagging on Letterman's name, Dave. It became so frequent that even Letterman couldn't ignore it, later pointing out how it felt like Rock had been reminded backstage not to forget who he was talking to. It was one of those small, spontaneous details that perfectly captured the playful tension between the two comedians, a mix of mutual respect and comedic rivalry. But this wasn't the first time Rock had shaken things up on Letterman's stage. The year before, in 2010, he'd made another appearance that was just as memorable, maybe even more so. At that time, Letterman was dealing with the fallout of a major personal scandal. He had publicly admitted to having affairs with several of his female employees, an admission that had made headlines and sparked plenty of controversy. So when Rock walked onto the set that night, everyone expected him to mention it, and of course he did. From the very start, Rock began teasing Letterman about his gravelly, sick voice, joking that he probably just didn't want to go home to his wife, Regina Lasco. Letterman had only recently married her, and the timing of that comment hit especially hard given everything going on. The joke landed, but it came with that unmistakable Chris Rock sting. Funny, bold, and just a little too real. Then, in a surprising twist, Rock showed a moment of understanding. He hinted that he knew what it was like to be in trouble at home, saying he'd been there himself. It was a brief moment of empathy tucked inside a roast, but, in hindsight, it carried a deeper weight. Years later, Rock would openly discuss his own infidelity and the toll it took on his marriage, which ended in divorce in 2017.